Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Miguron Nagain, at least that's how I'm going to pronounce it. This is a reasonably carryable pocket brick. It is definitely a thick boy intentionally. Miguron is a company that many of you guys are familiar with, and for the most part, they make very traditional, straightforward, you know, what you expect when you think pocket knife. That's what they make. And then out of nowhere, they have a series of like hilariously overbuilt and super thick knives that are just fun, right? This is one of them. This is actually the most carryable of the three. I'm going to expand on that, let you guys know what I think. I spent some time with this, and it's got some pros and cons like anything else, but it is cool. I'll link it down in the description. If you are a fan of overbuilt knives in the context of just very thick materials, and you want all of these things to be premium, Miguron is the cheapest on the market, period, right? The only way you're going to get less expensive is if you change out the titanium to something else, you change out the blade steel to something else, and then compare it that way. But every other company that's making these like close to 1/4-inch blade stock plus titanium made out of some premium steel, right, etc. Every other company that's making stuff like this is charging hundreds more, usually on average. So Miguron is able to do this for people who like this stuff. I'll link all their stuff down in the description. Thanks so much to Miguron for sending this in. Before we talk about this knife, let's go ahead and get some specs here. So the overall length, which if you're going to measure length, it's handy to have, you know, a tape, which I placed somewhere else today versus its regular spot. Overall length, this guy's actually on the smaller side versus its other overbuilt Miguron brothers, 7.85, just about, I mean, it still definitely feels like a full-size knife, but it's just shy of 8 inches, making it much more carryable than the other guys. 3.5 inches of blade still, cutting edge just, no, you know what? It's right at 3.25. How about some size comparisons? First, before we do the regular stuff, let's compare it against Miguron's other overbuilt knives. This is the Miguron Arma and the freakishly overbuilt Miguron Nagain. So this knife, like fairly recently I said, is the most carryable of knives that I would classify as overbuilt. It was also the least expensive up until this point. I think these two are pretty much the same. The Nagain is, I think, $50 more expensive. It's much larger, has a thicker blade even, but it's still substantially cheaper than everything else on the market. These are, if you're looking specifically for thick materials, titanium and premium blade steel, these are the least expensive on the market, specifically with those traits and being at or over a 1/4 inch in blade stock, or very near 1/4 inch. And the Nagain is obviously much more. But anyways, this is how it compares. It's smaller than both. And you know, but I mean, both of these are huge knives, right? So even though this is smaller, it is still essentially a full-size knife plus the thickness of materials. Let's put it up against some normal, you know, the normal stuff that I always compare to. Any custom scales in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and others. So up against the AD10 and the AD20.5. You can see it's kind of in between, right? Cold Steel being the company known for super robust stuff. You can see here how much thicker it is than, like, you know, the AD10. This is a really robust knife. Not that thicker means better. In this case, thicker just means haha thick, haha. But it actually, you know, it slows you down in terms of cutting performance. This is always difficult for newer people to understand. Why would a knife company include elements that make their product not as good at what it is supposed to do? And to you, I would say, oh boy, that's the tip of the iceberg. Welcome to the knife world. It gets so much weirder. The ironies and the contradictions of this stuff. Can you imagine an iceberg, like, of the last 20 years of, like, the popular knife world? Oh my goodness. Anyways, we don't have time for that today. Enjoy the journey. That's my advice to new people. Enjoy the journey. Don't get too hung up on one thing, right? None of this is going to make any sense. Or plenty of stuff is still not going to make sense at the end of the journey. So up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3. Definitely very close to the size of the PM2, just substantially thicker. And then finally, let's put it up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca. How's the action on this knife? Miguron makes a good premium knife. I think that their quality really stands out in their overbuilt premium stuff and their budget stuff. Their regular premium stuff is fine. It just doesn't really stand out because there's not a lot of personality here. There's a ton of personality in this knife. The action is fine, I think, largely due to the fact that the blade is so heavy. I mean, it is a heavy blade. Very controlled action, not glassy, but very controlled. You only have one means of deployment, which is a little awkward. As somebody who loves manipulating knives with the reverse flick, I'm happy that this has a ledge here. There's enough material in this blade they can easily cut into it from both sides and still have enough material there in between to be fine, but you use that ledge to deploy it. You can also pinch open it and wheel it out, or, you know, if you really dig in there, you can use your thumb to flick it out. Okay, it probably should have a thumb stud. A lot of people are going to say it should have a flipper tab. Well, if they do that, the flipper tab ends up right here in the open position, which makes what is currently a roomy choil, where your index finger lays partially on the area where the thumb stud would otherwise be protruding. It would make that area incredibly uncomfortable because you'd be squeezed in here. It would be the typical super teeny tiny forward choil that doesn't really have enough room for your finger. So why is it there? You're just reducing the cutting edge. In this form, in this size of knife, the way they've shaped the handle and the forward choil, a flipper tab, in my opinion, is not the right way to go. It probably would have been a good idea to just tuck a thumb stud up here so it's a little easier to deploy it this way. But you can still get it open. That ledge is substantial enough that you can get leverage on this knife, and that's good because the detent for something that doesn't have a flipper tab is not heavy, but reasonably. It's like medium heavy. I mean, it's got it's a powerful detent. Yeah, for sure. So you can do it, right? If your middle finger, if your reverse flick game isn't very good, you'll be pinch opening it and wheeling it out like this for a bit. Access to the lock bar is good. There's a piece that's cut just slightly higher on this side, and it is nice and comfortable to disengage. The blade will actually come down, a tab will come down and stop on your finger. You can kind of see it like right here. If you get it just right, and the detent ball is up on the face of the blade. So that's nice. You don't have to let the corner of the sharpened edge come down on your finger to stop it. If you like to disengage it with one hand, you can just let that tab engage and then turn it and go. It's actually, all things considered, pretty easy to manipulate. How about carry profile? Thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. Yeah, it's definitely the smallest of the three overbuilt Migurons, but it is still definitely a pocket brick in every sense of that definition, 100%. I'd be lying to you if I said that I didn't notice it in the pocket. I did, not as much as the Arma or the Geddon. And by the way, yes, those two knives are named intentionally that way. Guess who named them? Me. Miguron literally reached out and said, what should we name these? And we went back and forth with a bunch of stuff, and then I ended up saying, you know, originally it was one knife, and I said call it the Armageddon. And they were worried about keywords, and they didn't like the idea of the implications of the end of the world. And so naturally what you do to get around that is you just split it into two words, which still has the same meaning. But they ended up with two different models, and I said just call one the Arma and one the Geddon, and that worked out. So that's the story behind that. That was my suggestion. I did not name this knife, but I did notice this more than, not quite as much as the Arma, and definitely nowhere near as much carrying the Geddon. But you still notice it. It's very fat and heavy, but it is still manageable, right? If you really want to carry a big overbuilt knife like this is much more manageable than either. So it's thick, length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. It's kind of unassuming from this perspective. It doesn't really look like anything absolutely insane. So yeah, I mean, height-wise, it's almost the same. So it approaches the same height as the Para 3 and PM2. Not quite as long as the PM2. I think maybe a little bit. Yeah, a little bit longer than the Para 3. Weight! We'll do weight. Let's talk about materials. What are we looking at for materials? On this version, we have a DLC. Yes, legitimately, that's DLC, not PVD. DLC M390. Blasted titanium frame with some pill-shaped carbon fiber inlays on the front side. No, they did not fall out on the other side. That's just how it looks. But yeah, that's what we're looking at there. You can also get this in a two-tone uncoated blade. HRC in the M390 on the DLC ones. The industry standard 59 to 61. You're always going to get 1 point lower on the range if it's coated. I believe the uncoated one is 60 to 62, so that's cool. But the geometry of this will definitely reduce the cutting performance despite the M390, the M390 being heat treated properly. So that's one of those funny ironies that we just all kind of laugh at and then pay for anyway. But that's the case with this, right? M390, titanium backspacer, and a milled clip. Do we have milling for weight reduction? Whoops. Sorry. Still bumping the camera 7 years later. Yes, we do. How much does this knife weigh? And that's why you're going to notice it. It weighs essentially 7 ounces. There are many full-size, titanium knives that don't weigh that much, and they're still considered heavy. I noticed it, right? It's thick and it's heavy. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, I need to switch this out. I cannot carry this, right? That's what I noticed carrying it was in jeans or cargo shorts or something where I'm wearing a belt. I was fine, right? I mean, I was like, oh, there's a big knife in there, but not like, oh man, I can't get through my day. No, it was much, much different. And even, the Arma, the Geddon, I can't get through the day with this. This is just ridiculous, right? It's fun. I love this knife. Like, it's really fun, knock yourself out. You can buy this knife, right? I'll link it in the description. But this is like my absolute peak, right? Was the Arma. I was like, I can get through my day, but man, this is a lot of knife. This was easier than that, no problem. Let's measure the blade stock thickness. I want to say this comes in at close to 1/4 inch. Boy, my level of preparedness today, there we go. I want to say it's probably 230 thousandths, just shy of 1/4 inch. Nope, it's a 1/4 inch, guys. So if you're wondering, it's thicker than any cold steel knife that, these types of knives really bother cold steel fans because they can't, some of them are so hardcore. They really believe themselves to be part of a special club. Hey, cold steel fans, I like cold steel knives too. You don't have to be part of a club to buy them. Anybody with, a reasonable amount of money can just go to like Blade HQ and buy a cold steel knife. You don't have to be a special person. Like, they are literally right out in front of your face. You don't have to even know that much about knives. Like, here you go. Here's a cold steel knife with a triad lock. Congratulations. You're part of this imaginary club now. They're not that special. But for some reason, and I know the reason, it's the triad lock, right? And the feeling that it gives you, like, because you're carrying what you perceive to be as an indestructible folding knife, you are therefore a better person and superior to the other people around you. So in the event that they don't know this, you need to let them know by informing them that you are in fact carrying a cold steel knife with a triad lock. They hate the fact that there are knives that could possibly share that limelight in any sense, even if it's just imaginary from their perspective. Because these knives are not as strong as cold steel knives with triad locks. But the fact that it has an element that represents strength when compared to a cold steel knife, right? You understand what I'm getting at here? It's kind of like you got one guy with a lifted truck and another guy with a lifted truck, but his lifted truck is slightly bigger or his tires are bigger versus the lift not being as tall. Who cares? I'm telling you, guys think I'm making this up? The number one craziest, most goofiest, offbeat comments I get are from hardcore, oblivious cold steel fanboys. They're an insane breed of person. So that's why I had to, preface this statement with that speech there. This is thicker than anything that cold steel makes. Even the big 4 Max, whatever. This is the same thickness as a Praetorian tie. Does that make this superior in any way to not just cold steel products, but any other knife? No, it is quite literally just a thick blade. It might be stronger than the exact same geometry made thinner if you're going to do something that could only be described as abuse, right? The only way to determine which is stronger would be to use the thing improperly. So it's not something that matters anyway. Most people who buy stuff like this buy it because it's ridiculous, because it's silly, right? That's the conclusion you need to arrive to not get so fired up about it. Overbuilt knives always fire people up, and I find it hilarious, right? It's just it's such a weird mix of people who are stuck on, utility only, don't make a tool unless it's perfectly utilitarian, and then you add to that soup the weird cold steel guys. It's just a tornado of nonsense, right? But yeah, it's a 1/4 inch, so it's really thick. It's definitely the same thickness as the Medford Praetorian tie, not the T, the tie, right? Well, not being as big or cumbersome, right? So yeah, there you go. Let's go and do a hardware check. God, that section was long. Fun though, always enjoy. I'll never miss an opportunity to take a jab at an oblivious, obsessive cold steel fanboy. The body screws are, oh boy, those are bigger. Yeah. Thank you. Finally, if you're going to make a big old chunky boy, at least give us the appropriate hardware. God, the pivot's even bigger than T10. The body screws are T10. These are T. Did you guys get weird on me here? Are you getting weird? These body screws are, I just replaced my T8 bit, by the way. These are T8. Thank you. T8 clip screws, T10 body screws, a T8 lock bar insert screw, and then I believe the screw for the pivot is a T15. That's great. Now you're going to have to be switching out your hardware here or there, but I'll tell you what, unless you're a complete idiot, you will not strip any of that stuff. Even the best quality bits, if it's T6 or smaller, it'll strip, right? The best quality screws, same thing. You can screw up the bit of, that's why I hate that. I hate T6 or smaller, right? Actually, I hate anything under T8. So I guess T7 if that exists. I know it does. It just doesn't seem like it exists on anything. T8 or bigger. This is T8 for the small screws, T10 for the body screws, and T15 for the pivot. Thank you very much. As long as you have the right tools for the job, you should be good to go. Okay, meat and potatoes time. This is actually a pretty darn comfortable knife. It actually has ergonomic lines that make sense versus something like the Praetorian tie that has no ergonomic lines that make any sense whatsoever. I still don't know what Greg Medford was thinking when he made that knife. Now, that comes from somebody who actually enjoys that. Now, I enjoy how it looks. I enjoy the history behind it and its presence in the knife world, right? That alone, right? I mean, Medford and who he is as a person, that's a totally different subject. But the knife itself, I do think is cool. But God, it's like it's like squeezing a pine cone. It's awful. It has no ergonomic lines whatsoever. This is actually pretty comfortable. The pocket clip is awkward because it's thin, and I think I can feel it because it's sitting on top of an incredibly wide handle. But it is thin enough it doesn't create any ergonomic hotspot zones or anything like that. And the corners of the clip are knocked down. It's also milled. But it's awkward because it's shallow, so sometimes I fight the clip, but we'll come back to that. Honestly, pretty comfortable. If it were thinner, it wouldn't be as comfortable because it's flat and kind of like abrupt edges right here. Not sharp, just kind of abrupt. But there's enough material here that it's comfortable locked in. The choke up spot is also really good. I'm not upset with the ergonomics on this. I mean, I think that Miguron has done a good job with all three of these. They're really, especially the Arma 2 with the contouring, and the Geddon is just, I'm not sure if it's comfortable or if it's just like, oh my God, this thing is so ridiculous, I can't help but feel good while I'm holding it, right? I think it's actually comfortable. But yeah, this is pretty good. The carbon fiber inlays here make no difference whatsoever. They're just like little long lumps. But yeah, the jimping, definitely functional. Probably could have extended that out here before this little notch in the blade, but okay. The DLC looks great. Miguron, keep doing this. The DLC on your knives is a really good idea, and I can promise you, if you extend this DLC coating option to your premium stuff, it will give people a reason to buy some of those knives that appear, and I'm going to be a little harsh here. A lot of Miguron stuff is very bland and very similar, right? It looks incredibly similar, not just to other Miguron knives, but other knives on the market. So even though the price is really, really great, they just don't offer a lot of, incredible personality. Adding a DLC option to the blade will give a lot of people a reason to pick some of those up because that's an element that people really, really like. DLC is not a joke. It's a incredibly meaningful coating that adds amazing scratch resistance to the blade and also amazing corrosion resistance to the blade on top of, in this case, an already corrosion resistant composition, which is M390, which is the wrong composition for a blade this thick, and furthermore, this blade stock thickness is wrong for a folding knife making the whole thing just kind of a fun thing that still functions as a knife that you can enjoy, even though it is creating a disadvantage for you, right? So there's a lot of layers to that onion to peel back. And I think I'd rather just aggressively continue with the review. But I do like, as a knife enthusiast, I guess, let me reduce it to that. As a knife enthusiast, I do love the DLC coating added to a satin finish blade because it looks awesome. There's no increased drag to what we used to only have chalky DLC with Spyderco's, and that increased drag. This is only benefit. There's no difference between the surface of this and the friction it creates and regular satin finish blade. So you just get to enjoy that nice black shiny look. Now, if you don't like the look, then okay, you just get the other version. But I love that we have an option for a satin DLC blade. It looks so good. This is a blade shape that's been done before. It's just a compound grind on sort of a harpoon clip point, whatever you want to call it. So it's thinner right here, and it gets thin for a 1/4 inch thick blade stock, but it's still not thin. Now, will it slice? Absolutely, right? Not efficiently, but it will absolutely slice. There's no reason why something like this, it might not want to bite initially, but can it slice? Yes. If you push this whole wedge into something thick, like cardboard or rubber or styrofoam, you're going to have a way harder time cutting with something like this versus just a regular pocket knife, right? But, at least you'll feel cool while you're doing it. This big old crazy honking thing. And yeah, the blade will be more durable. It's very unlikely that you'll break that tip. I mean, if you're doing something where you're questioning that, you should probably question what you're doing, right? But it will hold up better than the exact same geometry with a thinner blade stock. So I guess if that's really important to you, okay. Probably should be using a fixed blade at that point, but okay. The blade's great. Miguron always does a good job with their symmetry on each side. The cutting bevel is great. It's even all the way out to the tip. Honestly, the blade looks good. I like this cut-in area, like these 3 lines. It's all just decorative, right? This is a gunk trap. You'll get gunk in there. Clean it out. Blow it out with compressed air. It's not that big of a deal. But if you use it all the time, you're definitely going to get crap in here. That's just the way that it's going to be. I like the dark gray titanium. I think that looks good. Just a couple of little lines here and there to give it some personality. I don't know why these lines are this way and these lines are this way. I also don't know why they didn't do the carbon fiber on both sides. Probably would have interfered with the pocket clip. You probably could have just placed them in different areas. But okay, not a big deal. It's kind of a neat way to lay in carbon fiber. They probably could also have done it without the carbon fiber, but it gives it a little bit more personality, right? No lanyard hole. Nobody cares, or very few people care. Can you touch the blade from back here? Yes, you can. The first, I can get my finger in there and touch the first inch of it. Watch out for that. Probably Miguron on stuff like this, it doesn't really matter if you throw the balance off. I mean, boy, it's pretty well balanced, right? This is a titanium backspacer, so if you ran it all the way up, your balance would shift from here to probably here, which is still fine, and the thing is already so heavy it hardly matters. Run that backspacer all the way up. The gap is so wide, and the initial cutting edge runs so close back here because of, how it kind of curves upwards. Better to just cover the whole thing up, right? The same, like they got it right with this one. It's just like that teeny tiny little bit right there. Same thing with it. Well, almost the same thing. Like just go ahead and run these backspacers all the way back up and just add a curved area at the top so we're not touching the blade. It's so thick that the risk of cutting yourself this way is pretty low, but you can still do it. So yeah, just cover that up. Like that's definitely going to be the way to do that. Pocket clip in and out of the pocket. The retention is insane on this thing. It's very pinchy and it's very shallow. So you're going to have to fight because the only way that this makes any sense, like, yeah, it'll go over the pocket seam of an athletic short really easily, but then your pants will fall down because you're wearing athletic shorts and trying to jam this super thick knife into the pocket. In your cargo pants, your work pants, your jeans, the pocket seam is much thicker, usually thicker than the space between the surface and the tip of the pocket clip bill. And that means that you have to dick with it with 2 hands, right? So probably a little taller at this point. I'm not sure that it matters too much. You could also contour the pocket clip to make it, ergonomically friendly if you create like a bill that rises just a bit more. But that's the only issue with a pocket clip is it'll fight you sometimes. Steel lock bar insert that doubles as the over travel stop. Massive stop pin as it should be. Tons of shouldering. You might guess there's no blade play. The amount of surface contact with the lock bar, also the lock bar tension and the thickness of the lock bar in general. I mean, there's no blade play up, down, left, to right. And very little chance of this thing disengaging unless you are, if you're hitting the spine of this harder than I just did, if you're doing more than that, you're being stupid with your knife. Whatever it is that you're doing is wrong. If you are, if you're like, I managed to disengage it, then you are pounding, probably swinging it as hard as you would swing a baseball bat against a solid surface. And that proves nothing in terms of what a knife is capable of, right? So this will survive that, but it doesn't need to survive anymore. I would recommend, again, a cold steel triad lock for people screaming it. Go ahead and do that. But again, if you need the strength of the cold steel triad lock, you might as well use a fixed blade, which is still a better option. So ask yourself what you're going to do with it, right? And why you're doing it. But yeah, it'll withstand normal, natural forces in natural circumstances that you would find yourself in while using something like a folding knife. But yeah, the lockup is good. No blade play up, down, left, or right. No up and down play, anything like that. No lock stick, which is great. The steel lock bar insert doubles as the over travel stop. I don't know if I mentioned that. Maybe I did. No pivot lash. Pretty smooth and consistent in here. This will continue to work itself in. It's probably the DLC coating there's a tiny little bit of like friction that I can feel in there. And then, like I said, a nice, fairly heavy detent with perfect centering. Do we have perfect centering? It was slightly off to one side. We might actually be slightly off to the right. Maybe it's just my eyes. I don't know. You guys tell me what you think. No detent lash either. This ridiculously overbuilt and very cumbersome versus your traditional pocket tool knife. Comes in at $307 for DLC. No, it's $305 for DLC, $298 for non-DLC. However you look at this, whatever your opinion on overbuilt knives is, this remains to be the least expensive option when combining this specific dimension, these dimensions of these specific materials on the market. There are plenty of other knives out there that are DLC M390 and titanium for under $300. There are no other knives out there that are DLC M390 and titanium for under $300 with this thickness. Very specific. And you might say, that's so specific, Metal Complex. Like, does that really say anything? Is that a good value when it's made for such a specific population of people? And the answer is yes, to exactly those people. It might surprise you how many people out there don't really care if their pocket tool is built in a way that actually slows them down. If it puts a smile on their face, they'll go for it. And if they can save some money in the process, great. So if you don't like overbuilt knives and you, for some reason, watch this far in the video, I can tell you now that this is probably not going to be for you. If you do like overbuilt knives, but you don't like overbuilt knife prices, but you absolutely have to have titanium and M390 and all that special stuff, well, then you're going to love this, right? It's the most pocket-friendly overbuilt knife on the market. Frankly, you'd probably like anything from Miguron knives. So again, they'll all three be linked. For obvious reasons, this is not a knife that I recommend to everybody. Far from it, right? For the average person, you can spend a lot less money and get a knife that is substantially more capable, which I am certain is the comment that is flooding the comment section right now because nobody expects me to say that. I don't know why. I don't know why people don't realize that I understand that, but I'm certain that people have pointed that out without having finished the video. Yeah, it's true. You can spend a lot less money and get a much more capable thing. But this is cool for this specific category, right? I like it for those reasons. So that's going to be pretty much it today, guys. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex and on TikTok at _metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.